My brother lost his job along with all his savings several months ago, and soon after he asked me if it would be okay if he and his wife stayed with me until they could afford their own place again. I hesitated at first, considering I only have a one-bedroom apartment, but according to them they had no other options, so of course I invited them over and bought a blow-up mattress for the living room. For the first month things were manageable, although admittedly cramped. Then my brother told me that sleeping on the mattress was giving him back pains. So he asked if he could buy a small double bed for the living room. The living room is by far the biggest room I have, so I told him that would be fine as long as there was still room for my couch, TV, bookshelves. The living room is also connected to my kitchen in an open plan style. So I reminded my brother to leave walking space around the bed. It's now been 2 months and things have gotten a lot worse. When they first moved in, I would still use the living room every day to unwind on the couch after work. Now whenever I go in, there's a strange vibe like I'm intruding. My brother and his wife are often sitting in bed together when I go in. I always knock and stare at me pointedly until I leave. Sometimes when I sit down they will directly ask me for some alone time and say they would like the room to themselves. This came to a head yesterday when my sister-in-law messaged me with a timetable she'd made of when it would be a good time for me to use the living room. The timetable basically says that they will allow me into the room for an hour each evening, plus 20 minutes around meal times. I basically shut her down instantly and told her there was no way I'd be following the timetable since in the end it's my apartment. She sent me back a huge message with a dozen paragraphs about how my constant presence was ruining her marriage with my brother and they feel like they have no privacy. I tried to talk this over with my brother that night, but when I got home neither my brother //SIL were talking to me. So he's clearly just as pissed. Today an Amazon parcel arrived for my brother with a lock for the living room door, which I told him there's absolutely no way I will allow him to install. My brother says I'm creepy for wanting constant access to where they sleep and he's insisting on installing the lock anyway. I am 15 years old, just celebrated my birthday. My family doesn't have a lot of money, so I didn't expect much. Mom cooked my favorite dinner, and we all had ice cream for dessert. I also got a birthday card with $25. It was a nice day. My boyfriend, 15 years, was invited to the birthday dinner but couldn't make it because he had to work. He felt really bad but promised to make up for it the next day. Even though he works, all of his paycheck goes to his parents to help support his big, 5 siblings, family. He has always been great about finding fun, interesting, creative things for us to do that are free, cheap. It inspired me to up my game and help find fun, cheap activities for us, but I'll admit that he's still so much better at it. So, while I absolutely was not expecting a gift, I was definitely looking forward to whatever he imagined up for our day. There's a bakery I love, but it's over an hour away from where we live. The desserts are delicious, but expensive. I often talk about this one cupcake I love from that bakery, but I can only enjoy it when I'm in the city and can afford it. He doesn't have a car, so he had to take a train, then walk, then take a train back to get me my favorite cupcake for my birthday. He also planned a historic walk of our town, with a bunch of obscure history he'd researched that I didn't know about. It was awesome. I asked to go home to put the cupcake in the fridge while we walked so it would be nice and fresh for me later. We went on a nice long historic walk and it was a great day. Not gonna lie. When I got home my mouth was already salivating thinking about that cupcake. When I opened the fridge, it was gone. I found the empty container in the trash. I went to the living room and asked my parents who ate my cupcake, and Dad dismissively said he did. He thought it was an extra. I threw a shit fit. I said it was my birthday cupcake and he was an asshole for eating it. He said if my BF really cared about me he would have bought me more than one, and that they gave me $25. So go buy more if it's really that important. He doesn't think he did anything wrong and is calling me an entitled brat for being upset. I think my BF went above and beyond to get me that cupcake, much more than my own father did for me, and he should feel ashamed and apologetic for what he did. I believe it started when I was around 6 years old. My parents often had friends over in the house. I didn't know they were polyamorous OFC. One day I was outside playing, got hurt, and when I ran inside caught my parents making out with some random guy. They told me they have other adults that they love and it's a completely normal thing. Me being a child just accepted that. They gave up being secretive and their partners would constantly be around, even joining on outings. I remember that on my 10th birthday they invited 3 of their partners, one of who I'd never seen before. And for the rest of the day my parents just withdrew from my party and hung out with them. I never saw them doing anything explicit again, but they would kiss their partners, hug them, make flirty comments. Something that would be normal between parents, but with many more people. Sometimes I came home from school and my parents were gone and there was some random adult in our house. Some of them seemed surprised that my parents even had a child. I always hated it, but since my parents had told me this was normal, I assumed many adults probably did similar things and that it's just an adult thing all kids hate. Later they had less partners and eventually seemed to stop. Not that I'd know for sure. I moved out with 17. I didn't think about it anymore. A year ago I started therapy, other reasons. As usual the topic of my upbringing came up and it brought back many feelings I wasn't aware of. I realized that although my parents were always good to me, I had never really felt close to any of them and still have a lot of resentment, that they made me feel like I had to compete for my parents' attention with random strangers. A while ago, I visited them and they told me they are going to take part in a documentary about polyamorous families, and that the producers would like to include interviews with the children. So they would love if I could agree and tell everyone that polyamory doesn't mess kids up. All my resentment bubbled up and I said that I cannot agree because I would not be able to say anything positive. My parents looked shocked. I had never brought this up before, and asked why, and I unloaded all, that I always felt pushed aside. We barely had any family time without strangers intruding. It turned into an argument and I became loud and yelled that the truth is it did me up and they shouldn't have had a child. My mother cried and my father said I should probably leave. So I left and was shaken up for the rest of the week, but also felt regret because I've never made my mom cry before. Later my father sent me a message that was like, "We are sorry you feel that way. Can we have a calm discussion about this soon?" Even though I tried to, it's like I can't reply. This argument brought something very emotional up in me. In the past month my older brother's fiancée left him. This meant he lost his house because the home they lived in was in her name. He lost his vehicle because what he was driving was her old car. He also lost his job because he was so focused on his breakup that he was constantly making mistakes. He moved in with our parents who live about 5 minutes away from my husband and I. I do have a lot of sympathy for him. He literally has nothing, no home, no car, no job, no relationship. The problem is, this is 3rd time this has happened to him. That's right, he has had 3 fiancées leave him now, and every time he winds up losing everything. He has had 2 cars impounded because he gets so upset over his breakups he loses his job and can't make payments on his vehicles. My parents and I have bailed him out of these situations every time. I even paid off his back payments on his car, paid for his dog's vet bills, and paid some of his rent before. My parents and I have literally spent thousands of dollars trying to help him. Each of the past 2 times he winds up moving back in with my parents who are in their late 60s. While we pay for everything for him, whenever he goes through a breakup he becomes a total jerk. He spends every weekend with his friends out camping or vacationing. How he pays for it I have no idea. After the 2nd fiancée he took a trip to Fiji with his friends but couldn't afford to pay his rent. He mostly ignores me unless he needs money, which, during this breakup I am refusing to help him out at all. The worst part is he treats my parents like garbage. If they ask him questions like, "Have you been looking for a job?" he will yell at them. He has no problem eating the food they provide for him and living in their house rent and utility free. And driving my mom's brand new car, which she got because he totaled her last car, but makes them absolutely miserable. My mom told me he will yell at them, call her stupid, trashes their house, sleeps all day, and leaves the care of his dog up to them. Every time I see my mom lately it's obvious that she's been crying. The most recent event took place on Sunday. In an attempt to get him out of the house for a while I offered to take him out in our boat. He seemed super excited about it, and when he's excited he can actually be a lot of fun to be around. He tells me he's hanging out with friends but will be back in town Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon rolls around and he's nowhere to be seen. I get a text around 6 p.m. that he's decided to go to a local tourist destination with all his friends. They are going to tube down a river. I'm bummed because I was honestly looking forward to it and because my brother has once again chosen his friends over his family. But it's whatever, I honestly don't rely on him for anything, so it's not that big of a deal. But then I find out he's driving my mom's car and she has to be in her office early Monday morning. Then the peaceful protests in our town turn into full-on riots and my brother is still not home. At this point he can't get home because they've blocked off access to our town, so he just stays with his friends, and I wind up taking my mom to work. My dad tries to talk to my brother on Monday about how irresponsible he was and my brother just yells at him, and then locks himself in my parents' basement for the rest of the day. My parents are miserable. They want to help and have always said they will do anything for us kids. But they are just enabling my brother every time they bail him out. My dad has major health problems that are being exacerbated by the stress my brother is causing. My mom has a history of severe depression that I see her slipping back into the longer my brother is with them. I'm really close to my parents and they are usually very fun people. The longer my brother stays with them, I am seeing them become depressed, short-tempered, and miserable. I tried telling them to kick him out, one of his friends would surely take him in. But they insist that they don't want to leave him homeless. I can't convince them to kick them out, but is there anything else I can say or do that might get my brother to get his head out his ass and get a job? How can I get my brother to see his behavior towards my parents is unacceptable? It just sucks. I used to really look up to my older brother because he is outgoing and funny and the sort of person everyone just gravitates towards. Now I'm just pissed at him for how he treats my parents and simultaneously scared for his mental health, because he clearly has a lot of problems.